again, thanks for your patience, but if you're anything like me at the show running around, it's nice to have a couple minutes to respond to emails and whatnot. So thank you. And welcome to today's session, Sustainability for the Future, How Food Companies Can Drive Change Through Climate-Friendly Practices. That is obviously such a relevant topic right now, and I'm excited for this session because it is all about action. And what I would love for everyone in the room to ask themselves, whatever type of company you're coming from, is what is our mission and our vision, but then how can we take that to the next level and really create a meaningful business plan that supports that vision? Today, our amazing lineup of panelists will be looking at how your brand can quantify its vision and create that type of impactful business plan. I find that very inspiring because it's when aspiration turns to action, and that very much is the focus of what we do here at Natural Products Expo. I'm Jessica Rubino. I'm the Executive Director of Content at New Hope, and I've had the opportunity to work with Dabone on a variety of initiatives. We worked together for years now, building out content to support a more sustainable palm industry and to educate the marketplace on that particular category. Today we'll be hearing about these ideas across categories and ingredients, but palm is certainly one of those that should continue to be a focus of our work. So today's panel is going to go like this. We'll be hearing from each of our presenters. They have some great information that they're going to share about their work in the industry, and then we'll turn it over to a panel discussion. And we also want to hear from you, and this is a great opportunity to just have a good conversation. So if you have questions throughout the panel, I'm all about just, raise your hand and we will dig into your questions. So with that, I want to introduce our speakers today. We have Nova Sayers, who's the VP of Growth and Innovation at How Good. Daniel Montes, who is the Program Coordinator at Control Union Certifications, and Felipe Guerrero, who is the Vice President of Dabone Organic USA. So thank you all for being here. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for coming to Expo East, our first back in person. It's nice to see everyone in 3D. And Nova, I will kick it to you.
Right. We're going maskless now, yeah?
On stage,
okay.
We will not wear a mask, but everyone else is. Please, thank you. Everyone's wearing their mask and they look great.
Great. Is my mic working okay? Okay, super. Well, it's great to see a few familiar faces in here today, but more importantly, it's great to see some new ones. It's my first major trade show during this pandemic. And I'm struck by the fact that this industry has one of the biggest opportunities to work on solving some of the crises that we've been facing and that are so evident over the past, well, it's been almost 2 years. So I'm really encouraged to see you all here today, and I hope that every company that's participating in this show makes the decision to lead in addressing sustainability, and in particular in addressing climate change. I think that this industry has a unique opportunity because we have a superpower to deal with these challenges, and I'm going to share with you what that is over the next few minutes. But just a little bit about me. I've dedicated my career to working on sustainability in the food industry for over a decade now, and I have to say I feel the most urgency today because we are facing a crisis for this. I just wanted to talk about the importance of this industry addressing climate change. I think it's evident to everyone who's here that we're in the midst of a crisis. World leaders have been telling us this, scientists have been telling us this, but now I think it's touching each of our daily lives. And so I wanted to share with you what the goal and the opportunity is for this industry in particular. The International Association of Scientists who have come together to form the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has told us that companies have to be part of the climate solution. And as a matter of fact, we need to not only reduce emissions, but we need to draw them down. So the goal before us, including the goal for this natural products industry in particular, and food especially, is to have our emissions in the next 8 years and then to reach net zero by 2050. So we have to do this in our lifetimes. But I think this industry is well prepared, and so I'm going to show you some of the ways that you can take action today, the minute you walk out of this room, and over the next several months. I'm not going to bombard you with a bunch of the facts around climate change, but I will say that we have a short window of opportunity to address this, and so the longer we wait, the higher the stakes will be. And there are also significant rewards out in the marketplace for doing this. There are studies that have shown, just over the past couple of years, an incredible rise in consumer demand for sustainable products. There was a study performed by the NYU Stern School in partnership with IRI, which is a product sustainability data study that they've been running now for the second time. And they've found that sustainable products have accounted for over 50% of the market growth, even though they only comprise about 16% of the overall market in terms of the number of products. So natural products and sustainable products are driving growth in the industry. That's where your future growth is going to come from. And our industry needs to message a little more clearly about that. The other big opportunity is to reap rewards in terms of price premiums. That same study has shown that sustainably marketed products command about a 39% price premium over conventional products. So that's pretty significant. So there are risks, there's a challenge ahead of us, but there's also a reward. So I wanted to talk with you about what you can do to make a difference. I'm going to skip through some of these because we've already covered that. If you want to get the citation for that study, I'm happy to share that with you later. So I wanted to come with you to you today with some solutions and talk about what you can do. And these are the 4 steps that in my career I've discovered are going to be the most effective. You need to understand how to measure your greenhouse gas footprint, along with all of the other impacts that our industry is making. I want to make sure that we take a moment to think about that. There's a lot of talk around greenhouse gas emissions and climate change, but the same conditions that are causing greenhouse gas emissions and climate change are also causing significant species loss and loss of biodiversity that our industry depends on, because we need diverse ingredients that are grown in a way that allows them to be nutritiously dense and so forth. It's also causing water depletion, water contamination, so on and so forth. So we need to measure greenhouse gas emissions in the context of all the other impacts that our industry causes. Then we need to focus where it matters most. We can't do everything all at once. It's a daunting challenge. So let's figure out where we can make the biggest progress most quickly. Then we need to, as I said before, not just reduce our emissions and improve our impacts, but actually draw carbon down, back down into the soil where it's productive. And I'm going to talk with you a little bit more about how to do that. And finally, we need to communicate. I think we're all aware that transparency is in big demand today, but we need to communicate backed by data in a way that can enable consumers and other stakeholders, like investors in our industry, to make informed decisions and support us in addressing climate change. So let me start with point 1, which is understanding how to measure greenhouse gas. The respected way for doing this is the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. It's an international standard. They categorize our emissions, or the emissions of any industry, into 3 scopes. Those are scope 1, which is direct emissions from facilities like your company offices or vehicles in a fleet. The second category is purchased electricity. They call that indirect emissions. The third category, scope 3, comprises all of the other indirect emissions that go into the production, distribution, and use of our products. Those are by far the biggest category of emissions. So that's where we need to focus. Within scope 3, in particular in the food industry, as you can see in this chart, the purchased goods and services part of scope 3 is the biggest. That's where the biggest emissions come from. That means the raw materials, the energy, and the fuel used to transport the ingredients that you put into your products. So that's where you need to focus. Now that we understand how to measure greenhouse gas emissions, what exactly are we going to measure? The first thing that you need to measure is your product footprint. How Good has spent 14 years assessing 2 million products out in the marketplace and over 33,000 ingredients that go into those products. And we built a software platform that can help you rapidly assess your product footprint. in a fraction of the time and cost that it has taken other methods to do this. You might have heard of life cycle assessment, for example. That can cost tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars. We've put all of that data inside of a platform that not only shows you the impact, the greenhouse gas emissions of each of the ingredients in your product, but also at which stage of production those greenhouse gases are being generated, at the farm or some of the other production stages. So that's the first thing you can do. You need to prioritize looking at the ingredients that go into your product and start to innovate there. How Good measures the ingredient impact in a product using layers of data. So we have vastly simplified the process to make it easy for you to use our data to make decisions. We use a combination of modeling and then adding layers of direct data if you have it. So if you know where your ingredients come from or how they're produced in terms of the farming methods, we can use that to refine our model. But even if you don't have those answers today, we can get you a highly accurate greenhouse gas footprint along with a footprint in terms of the other metrics that I mentioned are important to measure. So I think we've covered this in a great amount of detail, but I just want to bring the point home again by showing you this other pie chart, which is that in terms of ingredient emissions, the biggest reasons for those emissions is in land use change, that is clearing of forests or draining of wetlands in order to start farming on those lands. And then in the farming methods used to grow the crops that go into those ingredients. So let's just be clear about that. If there's one place where you want to work on climate change, this is the place to do it. I think I mentioned this point in great detail. I just wanted to make sure you saw the slide. After our 14 years of researching the impact of products and ingredients, we have found that these are the 8 most important impacts to measure in context. It's important to look at this with a systems perspective because greenhouse gas emissions are caused by some of the same conditions that cause biodiversity loss and the other impacts that you see here. By the same logic, if we can improve our greenhouse gas emissions, we may also improve biodiversity, soil health, water use, land use, etc. So measuring these together with a systems perspective will allow you to capitalize on those synchronous effects. What can you do to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions and draw them down? I want to go through what I've discovered in my almost 15 years of working on this are the 6 most effective ways to do this. And in the interest of time, I'm just going to focus on a few of these, but feel free to reach me after if you want to just think about this roadmap or take a picture of it, that's fine too. So the very first thing that we've discovered you can do through analyzing the data, as I've mentioned, is to understand the impact of different ingredients and choose your ingredients accordingly. So we plot the impact of ingredients on a spectrum that you can see here using a color coding scheme from red to green. Red being the biggest greenhouse gas emissions and green being the lowest or even net positive, meaning storing carbon. As you can see here, animal-based ingredients tend to be on the high emissions side of the spectrum, but there are some cases in which animal proteins like dairy or meat can be raised in such a way that they can actually help to sequester carbon or draw it down into the soil, like I said, where it can be productive. So it's important to understand what kind of animal product you're sourcing. On the right-hand side of the spectrum in green is where the net positive ingredients are. So those tend to be tree crops and crops that come from systems of agroforestry. I'm not going to get into a lot more detail here, but choosing your ingredients according to their greenhouse gas emissions is one of the most important things you can do. The next is to choose ingredients that come from an optimal location. I'm using the example of palm glycerin here, again, using our spectrum and looking at those raw greenhouse gas emission numbers on the left. You can see that the palm ingredients that come from Asia tend to have a bigger greenhouse gas footprint. Those that come from Latin America can be much lower, and my fellows who are here from Gabon are going to share with you some of the reasons why that is. Another thing you can do is to choose certified ingredients. Now, not all certifications are created equal, but I'm sharing with you here just one of the certification programs that really does produce some of the biggest gains in greenhouse gas emissions, particularly in those difficult ingredients like animal products. So land to market is a certification you should familiarize yourself with, and we consider it one of the best regenerative certifications out in the marketplace. Another important thing that you can do is to engage with suppliers and shift their practices toward regenerative agriculture. And what I'm showing you here on the screen is basically a spectrum of agriculture that is commodity-based, industrialized, highly mechanized agriculture that uses lots of chemicals over on the left. That's what we've been supporting over the past 50 plus years. We want to shift suppliers toward the green side of the spectrum as close as possible towards perennial and regenerative systems. And I've listed a few of the practices here that go along with that. It might be a bit hard to read, but things like practices and principles that support crop diversity, that grow multiple crops in rotation, that keep the soil covered with cover crops, that builds nutrient density through things like animals grazing and producing compost and things like that enrich the soil. So I'm not going to get into all the details today, but that's something really powerful you can do. And studies have shown that we can sequester between 20 and 60 tons of carbon per acre in soil from these types of farming methods. This is one of the most important things you can do, is engage with suppliers to shift to this type of farming. So now that I've shown you those first 3 steps, the final step is about communication. If you can start to communicate the benefit of your products through things like a product carbon footprint label, you can start to empower consumers to join you on the journey and to feel that they are also making a difference on climate change by purchasing your products. And that's a win-win-win. It's a win for you, for all of us as eaters and shoppers, and for the planet. So I just want to leave you with this final message. Food is fundamental. We're not going to stop producing food. We're not going to stop using land and raising animals to feed our species. But our industry has a superpower, and it lies in agriculture. If we can use our sourcing and the sourcing of the ingredients that go into our products as an engine or the fuel to foster this regenerative type of agriculture, we can make one of the biggest impacts in solving climate change of any of the industries on the planet. So that's my invitation to you today, is to ask yourself what kind of agriculture you want to support through your products and your sourcing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nova. Daniel.
Okay.
And again, we will have time for questions. I'm sure there were plenty with that rich information that Nova shared. So keep those and we'll be able to get to them during our panel presentation.
Okay. Thank you for joining us. I'm Daniel Montes. I work in Control Union Certification. I'm the program coordinator. And please allow me a few minutes just to explain about my company. In 2020, it was a 100 years anniversary. Now, 10 decades move forward, we have a presence in more than 70 countries, and we have like more than 5,000 employees worldwide. And pretty much we can cover the whole continent, and we are one of the largest certification bodies in organic and sustainable programs. This is one of the schemes, programs, certifications that we can provide, that we audit worldwide. You can see there organics, sustainable palm oil, Rainforest Alliance, sustainable sugar, social compliance, sustainable soy, and sustainable agriculture. Well, in this case, part of my topic was the role of the plant-based products in sustainability. I tried to focus just in 2 specific factors here that people now actually, they are more aware of these specific 2 topics, health and environment. Health, now every product, ingredient, is it good for me? Is it good for my body? And there is a huge change in the lifestyle. Now there are more people choosing vegan style, vegetarian, I didn't know about the flexitarian. One of my colleagues told me that yesterday, and I decided to include it here today. And more healthy diets. Now, we can see people reading the package, what's on the labels, what's behind every product that you purchase. You can see people reading actually in every aisle. So that's very important that people wants to know more about the product they are purchasing right now, what I'm consuming, and the benefits that I can get from it. And the other topic, the most important that I would try to focus here is the environment. Is it good for the planet? This product that I'm choosing right now, is it good for a sustainable world? Everything that we listen right now on the news is like the meat is right now 60% of the GHG, the greenhouse gases, right now in the food production. And meat and dairy requires significantly more resources than plant-based food. So in that, focusing on that now, sustainability programs and their labels have really, really an important role here. Consumers prefer no harmful and synthetic chemicals, they look for organic. They prefer something environmental friendly, they look sustainable. Low impact soil and water, good agricultural practices, and reduce waste. Now we can see a trend of upcycling products. And we can see it here in the event. There are now upcycling snacks. So I'm trying to use this post that one of my colleagues built actually, and it's really researched because that's the way we are trying to focus and actually how the consumer is focusing right now and importance about the labels. This is just a chocolate, and you can find here sustainable sugar. You can find here sustainable oil. You can find here the cocoa maybe came from a Rainforest Alliance certified project. Maybe the blueberry that it was in that chocolate came from a fair trade program that is beneficial for communities and workers in that specific project or region. All these products, all these ingredients can be certified organic as well, all of them. And if you can see the second one from the left, it's not even it's food or product, or it is a forestry program, because now even the packaging has to come from a well-managed forest. And that's the FSC, and you can see it right now in most of the packaging right now, they're choosing FSC or one of the forestry standards right now. So in one simple product, like a chocolate, you can find all these sustainable programs, all these trends right now that actually the consumers are pulling. And part of the, just as a summary right now, a plant-based program is just a set of requirements for a product, just a set of requirements. But actually, a plant-based lifestyle is a big change right now that is pulling the whole supply chain to the right direction. This lifestyle, is promoting and telling retailers, suppliers, and growers that consumers prefer sustainable products. So we are moving in that direction. The consumers are doing this right now, and this is the trend actually. And we as a certification body, we can see that extension for RSPO, palm oil certification has grown, forest certification has grown, fair trade certification has grown. So actually there's a huge demand for this type of products and ingredients. Just as the last slide, the Control Union has developed a plant-based verification programs. In case you have any concern about one of these specific schemes, you can visit us in the booth 1737. Well, thank you very much.
Am I plugged here or here? Both. Okay, here. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Felipe Guerrero. I'm Executive Vice President for DAWON. And thank you, Nova, and thank you, Daniel, for that both amazing presentations. I learned so much. Flexitarians, interesting. And I hope that what we bring you in terms of what we do in our company and what we're doing with a very controversial ingredient sheds some light on what companies are doing in order to be climate friendly, environmentally friendly, and be as concerned as the consumers are in terms of what we should do to make this a planet livable in the next 50 years. I mean, it's an issue for us, and I'll make it very clear in the presentation. Who is Davon? I need to start by saying that we're a family business. We've, as Control Union, have been over 100 years of family business. We're the largest employer, agricultural employer in Colombia, and that makes us very proud because we're directly employing, using fair trade certification systems, our people, and that makes us very different in Colombia, and very different in Latin America, really, and in the rest of the world. We're top-ranked producer of sustainable palm oil worldwide. Humbly, we can say that we're open of what we are, who we are in terms of what we do in Colombia. And we work together with everyone that can give us more information or can work with us in order to be a better producer. So in terms of who we are, our transparency, we're top ranked in the world. And third generation family operated company. We're a women-led company, which is also, it makes us very proud. This is who we are in Colombia. Around 2,600 people working in commodities in Colombia. Operations in various industries, including palm oil, bananas, cocoa, coffee, ancient grain, biodiesel, soap, glycerin, liquid bulk storage, and seaport operations. We were the first company worldwide to offer certified organic palm oil, and also organic rainforest alliance certified, and we were also the first RSPO certified company in Latin America, really. And that brings a lot of responsibilities. And how climate change and how greenhouse gases have impacted our company are very well evident. We rely on agriculture. This is who we are. That's our DNA. And we're now up in front of issues of climate that we don't understand. We don't understand when is it going to rain, when it was very well known. I mean, tropical areas in the northern of Colombia are flooding, are very dry for years, and then we don't have any rain. I mean, and it's been worsening for the past 10 years. So doing bananas, for example, under this situation is very risky. It's very risky for a company to produce in these terms because we don't know if we're going to be able to keep the bananas. Or in terms of palm oil, are we really going to be able to harvest in 5 years? Is climate going to change in 5 years in such a way that we're not going to be able to harvest this? I mean, it's a very complicated issue that we have on the ground because we know that there's a very big uncertainty of what we're going to do in the future. And that's one part of the story. Then coming up to our clients, are we going to be able to give them what they're asking for in terms of the quantity of the products that they need? I mean, it's a very complicated situation that we have in terms of agriculture, and this is why greenhouse gases are very important to us and how climate change is very important for us. We're located all around the world. We have companies in the United States, Australia, Japan, Europe, United Kingdom, newly opened Brazil, and in Santa Marta, Colombia. All of these areas are interested in our organic products and sustainable products and know that, that they're working with a company that cares for climate, cares for people, and cares for environment, which is what we bring to the table. Palm oil, particularly, is a versatile ingredient found in shampoos, baking oil, cookies, margarine, soaps. I mean, it's a very well-known product. It's a product that can be chemically used very easily. so it's in a lot of products. It's found in almost 50% of the supermarket products, and it's the most widely consumed vegetable oil on the planet. And this is very important, not because the importance of the amount used in the world, but because of the yields that the palm oil has when compared to other oils, other vegetable oils. So it's very important to circle back to what Noah was saying in terms of deforestation. If we're going to use vegetable oils, are we supposed to use something that is local, or are we supposed to use something that is more yielding? I mean, it comes back to a question of how we're going to measure that impact and how we're going to measure that back into the products that we use. Palm oil reputation is not good. We understand that. We know that very well. The palm oil industry is unsustainable. Palm oil is a devastation of tropical forests, habitat loss, human labor rights abuse, and we always say that's not palm oil. Those are companies doing palm oil. So we need to come back to where is that palm oil coming from, and what companies are responsible for doing this. Because at the end, palm oil is a very versatile product that works very well, and that using it and keeping up with sustainability practices makes it a very ideal product by itself. What makes palm oil sustainable? Well, support for local communities, sustainable energy practices, focus on conservation, third-party certifications, no deforestation, and vertical integration and traceability. And this last integration and traceability are very important to the trust that the consumers put on the market, which is very important right now. Much has been traveled in terms of where our product is coming from. All of our products and all of our companies are a click away on Google. So everything has to be very transparent, very comprehensive, and on the web if you want to make it in sustainability practices. This is what we do. This is our circle of energy in our companies. So we have our harvesting, our palm oil harvesting, which we make energy from biodigesteds. We have a methane production, and I'll come back to that in a second. Then we have the extraction mill where we get the oil. We have the amplification labs that we come back to the harvesting with the same fungus and bacteria that we have in the local areas. Then we have nurseries, composting, high conservation areas, and the clean development mechanism projects that we have. And the clean development mechanism project was set up 15 years ago, and this is how we produce methane, and this is how we power up our plants. But it was done back in the days as a business way to keep costs low. But at the end, it came back to being part of the strategy of the company. How are we going to decarbonize the company without losing the competitivity of the company as well? So it's a model, it's a sustainability model that has been put in place in order for companies to move forward with their growth and competitiveness, but also to not leave them aside in the sustainability, which is fundamental to their growth as well. Composting, well, we at least do 2,000 tons of compost per month in our plantations, protection areas in our farm, which is at least 15% in buffer areas, in high conservation areas, pathways, and methane capture that we do in order to generate the certificate of emission reductions and how to keep our emissions balanced. We came back, we were invited into the Climate Pledge a year ago. We were the first company in Latin America to measure and report greenhouse gas emissions, implement decarbonization strategies, and neutralize any remaining emissions, which is coming back to what Noah was saying about the 3 scopes. We need to find out what our 3 scopes are, because we're pretty much, all of our companies are pretty much knowledgeable of what we consume, and looking up in the internet, we can know how much we emit. But then coming back to the 2nd and the 3rd scope is where the challenge is, and how we're going to mitigate, how we're going to avoid those emissions from a responsibility of a company that wants to be carbon neutral in 2040 or 2030, like we have pledged as a group. So it's very important, and that's where our challenges are right now in terms of carbon emissions, how we're going to do this, how we're going to put more people in the area, because at least in Latin America, you may be interested in doing being carbon neutral, but what about the box maker that has no idea that, or is not interested in being carbon neutral, or has any interest in being in 2030? So how do you make that leverage other companies and your suppliers into getting into this same idea that you have? So it's a very challenging situation. In terms of social programs, entrepreneurship, inclusive businesses, and that's, for example, uniforms for our workers. And how do we avoid bringing those uniforms from half of the country, flying them into our plantations, but can we do them in the plantations? Can we set up shop in the plantations for the wife of the workers to do them, so we can avoid that? Those are the type of situations that we're trying to think outside the box, or at least from our perspective, think outside the box and see how we can be more inclusive in terms of business, but also mitigating the impact of carbon in our supply chain. Same thing with our classes and public schools. I mean, it's a full circle of education and trying to bring everyone on board with what we're trying to do. And it's very difficult considering our size and the focus of our culture in terms of climate change. Traceability and transparency comes back to the GHG directly. I mean, who you are supplying and what you are supplying, who's asking for that information, and how do you map it? Is to be completely transparent, report progress, and identify every step of your supply. And this is the first step that we've taken. Where are we going? Who is supplying you, and where is that coming from? And you would be surprised of how many circles does your product, boxes or bags or whatever comes into your product that circle around the world and then end up in your factory. So how to understand that, how to make it towards more carbon-friendly practices is a challenge as well. Daniel said it earlier in terms of certification. Well, we're trying to move in 4 directions: organic, and we already have most of the organic certifications. We're directly providers of organic products. In sustainability, fair trade, our SPO, Rainforest Alliance, ISCC. In terms of specific communities, we have, for example, kosher, and then in terms of quality, Global Gap, and non-GMO, which are very important for consumer importance. This is our last slide. These are social media if you want to follow us and get a hold of us. And if there's any information we have more information back in the back table for any further questions that you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Felipe. To see the stewardship in this category is so impressive, and your work to create a truly sustainable supply chain in the palm space is something that I've always admired, and why Debone has been such a great partner. So definitely encourage everyone to learn more. As Felipe said, there's great information back there, and you also have a booth here, correct? What is your booth number?
536.
536. So please do connect, and some members of the team here as well. I think we'll have a little bit of time to just chat afterwards. But before we jump in, I have plenty of questions for each of you. But before we jump into that, while these presentations are top of mind, any questions from anyone out there? Okay, well, please do jump in when you have one. But Nova, we love how good. We love the work. you were recently recognized at NBJ Summit, and you are obviously doing important things for this industry. I'm curious, in working with so many brands now, and how many brands do we have out here? I'm curious, the brand makeup, and then retailers, nonprofit, service provider. Okay. Okay, good. It's always good for us to get a sense of who's in the room. But for brands, what do you think is the #1 challenge that they're facing today for measuring their climate impacts and really looking critically at their ingredients and supply chains?
I guess I'm happy to say that in the past few years, there's been a lot more literacy about measuring greenhouse gas emissions in general. So I went over the greenhouse gas protocol because it's the most respected method, but there are some other methodologies out there, and there's a lot more literacy and learning across the industry. Brands are investing in taking the time to do that themselves in some cases, and not always rely on consultants because they want to have that knowledge in-house. That being said, even if you know how to do it, getting the data to measure your greenhouse gas footprint, and I'm sure Dabon knows this very well, is very, very challenging. Now, Dabon's in an interesting position because you're vertically integrated. Like you said, this gives you a huge advantage. But most brands are working, well, those of you in this industry already know, they're working with distributors and other wholesalers who provide them with ingredients that come from layers of supply that might be 5 or 6 layers deep, and they really don't have any leverage to access the data. So that's #1, biggest challenge. And then #2 is translating that data into decision-making and insights that will inform the business. There are plenty of companies that I've heard of who've invested all kinds of time and money sending out supplier surveys and spending years gathering that data, and it sort of sits in a silo somewhere in the company. It doesn't really shape decisions. So that's why we focus on putting the data in the hands of decision makers who are choosing which ingredients to purchase from which suppliers and how they're going to design their products. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Nova. Felipe, I saw you kind of nodding, being like, yes, I feel some of these. And your perspective is a bit different coming from the ingredient supply angle, but obviously you've faced your fair share of challenges. Can you talk about maybe some of those and what tools and resources have been helpful in your journey to continue to elevate your sustainability goals and how you meet them?
Yeah, of course. As Noah was saying, one of the most challenging issues is understand the protocols, the methodologies. Have someone necessarily instructed into using those methodologies and understanding how to interpret them, and then coming back to where the information is coming from and what type of decisions do we make. I think that we have a very challenging point there. Now, there's an extra layer of difficulty in our case. Some of the countries that we deal with, or at least where we're sourcing from, or even in Colombia, those factors are not there yet. I mean, we don't have any factors, so we have to use proxies. And sometimes they don't work very well for the industry that we're in. So we have to come back and measure everything and try to put together a figure that can help us move in that direction. And it's not a figure to give it out to people and just say it. It's like Noah was saying, it's a figure to make decisions, to take decisions and actions. So if you want to take decisions as a company, you have to be responsible enough to know where those figures and what you're going to do with them. So that is very challenging. I think I coincide completely with Nova in that regard. I mean, getting that information is not easy. Then explaining to the people, why are we doing this and what is the importance of that? One importance is to see it here from the United States with an educated public. Everyone is in the same boat of climate change, or at least in Europe, And other thing is explaining climate change to a country that's, or Latin America, which is in subsistency. So it's a different approach to climate change, whereas here is more how we're going to make this a livable planet in the 50 years, whereas in Colombia at least is how are we going to, how if we take care of climate, we're not going to get floodings that are going to take away your house because you live near a river. I mean, it's this type of communication as well that is an extra layer of difficulty for us in the ground. But it's more or less that.
So that leads me to a question that I didn't have before you answered that question. And I just want to throw this one out there to all of you, just more on that communication front. There are all of these nuances based on the challenges that different communities face. How important do you think it is for the entire natural products industry to come together with one clear message around climate versus maybe understanding the specific needs of specific geographies or communities?
I can say that I think that right now the message has been sent. Noah was saying in her presentation about the IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and they've already said, okay, this is where we have to be in 50 years if we want to have same cities in the coast or if we want to move up the hill, basically, because we're not going to have the same cities. Florida and the north of Colombia, everything is going to go. How to move into that direction? I think there has been like a lot of ways, like a lot of type of ways of moving there. But I think the most important communication that we need to align to is what the experts are saying. How we're going to move there, I guess some people will say it in one way or some people will say it in another way, but the way forward is one, and it's to tackle climate change as soon as possible, and not being altruistic about it. It's a real deal. It's the need to protect the planet that we're in. I mean, there's no planet B, and I know I've read it something. It's not my line, but there is no planet B. How are we going to grow up in a planet that cannot survive? I mean, it's this important.
Thank you, Felipe. Daniel, I want to kind of build on the action piece and what companies are doing, because all of this does sound very dire, because it is, and we need to act in a big way and fast, and we are seeing so many companies doing really important things. Part of this is commitment to plant-based, and we'll talk a little bit more to Nova about the criteria you look for, but Daniel, what type of growth are you seeing in that plant-based space, and how do you work with companies to go beyond a plant-based certification and really into these bigger changes across their entire supply chains and organizations?
Actually, it's very interesting because I can give you an example. A couple of years ago, we were invited by one of the big box retailers here, and they have a sustainability plan or goal for the 2022. The idea was we need to educate and communicate to all of our suppliers this sustainability plan that we have. So in that scenario, we needed to train, webinar, explain the situation, explain the new changes. And believe it or not, there's so many suppliers in the food industry. It's not only one, it's not one ingredient. You're talking about the whole world sending maybe tea from Sri Lanka, you're sending cocoa from Ghana, coffee from Peru, and it's very, very, very difficult to align all these people in one specific program, in one specific plan. But actually, that's the work of a certification body. We are a third party that goes to a company, and we are a different pair of eyes to over your operation just to see if you're aligned to this specific program, to this specific standard or scheme. It can be a certification, accreditation scheme, but it can be also just a company's own road and its own skin, and you need to be aligned. And actually, that's the idea. And the best part is, and also the difficult part is when you find being an author deviation in some of the requirements, like you need to take it and see it as an opportunity of improvement, because it's a continuous improvement in the quality of the process and activity. And that's pretty much what we try to see in most of the companies right now, big box retailers, these big companies, they want to align to these sustainable practices to the whole supply chain. And it's challenging, it's difficult, it's not easy, because you just mentioned you have 4 or 5 different middle person, layers, traders, and it's very difficult to understand the whole supply chain. But that's the goal. At least we need to start with a few. You need to start with a country. We need to start with a company or a country. You have vertical integration, so they know the full traceability of a product and all the ingredients they can sell. So that's pretty much the idea.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's there are many layers there, right? And I feel like the partnership piece that we'll dig into more is really important. Those long-term partnerships that can help companies make those continued improvements,
Exactly.
and we all can do even better, right?
That's the idea.
Nova, I want to talk a little bit from your perspective. When we chatted earlier, one of the things that came up is just because it's plant-based does not mean it's climate-friendly. So let's talk about that part of the conversation.
Yeah, and I want to share that I'm a big fan and cheerleader for the plant-based foods industry, for certain. So what I say should be taken in the frame of continuous improvement, I guess. I worked on a certified plant-based program with the Plant-Based Foods Association here in North America, and so impressed by the innovation that's going on in that space. And it's true that for the most part, plant-based products and ingredients and brands have a beneficial impact on the climate, or they can do less harm, let me say that, for the most part. But it can't be assumed. We have to protect against greenwashing and making any assumptions about plant-based. And so soy and palm are 2 perfect examples of this. They can be produced in a way that leads to deforestation, that depletes soil, that reduces habitat for species that are essential to protect the biodiversity and the resilience of the natural systems that our industry and our species relies on. So if you remember that spectrum that I shared about sort of the industrial end of the spectrum of production, moving away from that, even beyond conservation agriculture, and moving towards net positive production is the best thing that the plant-based industry can do, and that plant-based ingredients that come from that kind of a system, an agroforestry system, or a system, I think Dabon has explored this, where there are multiple crops that even have commercial application that are grown in the same region to protect biodiversity and build soil health and provide habitat for species even in between the cultivation of those crops. That's the best of the plant-based ingredients out there. So yeah, I think that's the point that came up for me in this discussion, is we need to know how those ingredients are being produced. And then the other factor to consider is where on the planet those ingredients are being grown. So plant-based ingredients can be grown in many parts of the world. And I showed that slide, I created that visualization of palm glycerin, because our data shows that palm produced in Latin America is superior from a greenhouse gas footprint, and that's because of the ecology and the conditions in that region, along with the growing practices. So, not to pick on almonds, but almonds are used in a lot of plant-based protein products. A lot of almonds are grown in California. I think it's upwards of 85%. That's a very water-scarce place. When we measure the impact of, almond-derived ingredients, they're plant-based, sure, but they've got a high footprint in terms of water, and it's a fairly significant footprint in terms of greenhouse gases. So maybe sourcing those almonds from another part of the world would be a superior decision.
Thank you, Nova. Felipe, would you add anything to that, since palm specifically came up as Nova was talking?
No, I completely agree. I mean, the biggest component of greenhouse gas emissions for a palm oil operation is the prior land use of the prior land use. What was it before the palm oil is being planted? Was it a forest? Was it a cattle area? And how are you going to compare your emissions of palm oil producing for 30 years versus what was there? And what's happening in Latin America, or at least in Colombia, is that the agricultural frontier is not opening but changing. It's changing from cattle, which is, well, you've seen cattle here in the United States. It's no trees, only grass, to having a palm oil, which by essence is pulling more carbon out of the air, and it's going to be 30 years there. So when you do the comparison, and I'm not saying cattle is bad, but the comparison from a carbon footprint, of course, is lower than in other areas of the world where there is deforestation in order to bring palm oil into the harvesting. So but that's one of those decisions that have to be made. Am I going to go that way, whereas I'm going to be penalized in the consumption of the food, or definitely I'm going to go on the cattle, maybe have a different way of doing it and be premium in the commerce. And those are coming back to what Noah was saying of the decisions that have to be made in terms of how the intensity of carbon is managed into the company, and how the intensity of carbon becomes a risk in the company, because it is part of the risk. We say financial risk, we say a people risk, we say I don't know, a lot of risks, but we never say what is the climate risk of the operation. And this is a climate risk, and we've made it a climate risk in the operation, because again, if we're going to invest and grow, where do we do it? Is it feasible? So,
Thank you.
I just want to add one little nuance on that. There's a term for those of you who are trying to build your literacy around this that's being used now called the carbon opportunity cost. And it's one of the ways of measuring what you're talking about. And it's something it's not evident to us, but what if that land had been left in its natural state? Could it be sequestering carbon now? Or what if that land was previously used for cattle grazing? The footprint was much higher. So maybe palm oil is the optimal use for that land now that it has been moved into agricultural production versus being left in its natural state. Anyway, it's a really interesting way of measuring impact.
Carbon opportunity cost. Any other terms we should know?
I'll save that one. The other one's for another day.
Thank you both. And I sort of jumped ahead by starting to talk about the challenges and how we can do plant-based as optimally as possible. But obviously, I just want to take a step back and Daniel, why and how much growth are you seeing in this space, and why are companies choosing to go plant-based? You had that slide that talked about health and environmental benefits, but from an industry perspective, what do you think is the main motivation for brands?
So far, we definitely is the concern in people is educating themselves more about the environment, the footprint of every product, of every ingredient, their own consume, the food consumed. But and we could see a trend. I think last year it was $17 billion, this industry, the plant-based industry. So, and it's expected for in the next 10 years to grow over 100 billions. So it's a huge trend, and all the companies now are trying to have at least one plant-based option, because people is starting to reduce the consumption. Some other that it is that is increasing the GHG, the greenhouse gases. So even the idea, I didn't know, even the idea of being flexitarian is just reducing. I can eat both, but I'm just reducing the number of meat or dairy products that I can eat maybe in a week or in a month. So with that in mind, actually you are promoting or eating more about plant-based products. So the whole industry is moving to what the consumer is demanding right now. And actually that's why we are seeing So far, even in the event, I could see hamburgers, snacks, even bacon from plant-based bacon. I never tried that before, but we can see it right now. So it is actually a huge trend.
Yeah.
And we are gonna see, I think, a reduction of the meat production and dairy products as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And the mainstreaming of it, Us Weekly is here, and they've been really involved in tracking products and trends here on the show. And I was speaking with them earlier, and they said the #1 trend they're seeing is plant-based, and that's with an Us Weekly readership, definitely mainstream consumer audience. So yeah, it's not going away. And then I think the opportunity here is all of those things that Nova and Felipe, you talked about, of elevating it and elevating what we do in the space. So switching gears a little bit again, because these are such big topics, I feel like the importance of collaboration, working together is so significant. Can you, Felipe, I've always been impressed by your perspective on this, of the power of the collective. Can you talk about how collaborating with others in this industry has been critical to helping achieve your goals?
So that's an amazing question. Thank you. I believe that it's vital. I mean, we and I said it in the presentation, we need to start engaging our providers into this, into our clients, our customers, and whoever is who we're sourcing from. It's not easy. It's a challenge that there's some sort of leverage, at least in the sourcing, because we are paying for a product. So, I mean, we can align into some terms what we're doing and how we're doing it, and have a goal. But this would be very how would you put this? A very one-way communication if we didn't have discussion with people that are bigger than us, that are more complex than us. And in that terms, that's one of the key issues or the key drivers that took us to the climate pledge. It was, and when I had the conversation with the people at Amazon who invited us, I was like, okay, if this were only to put a methodology in place and bring the GHG protocol or an expert and measure it, that would be very straightforward. But where the conversation lies, where the discussion lies between companies that are doing and have much more complex situation than us, or have it bigger than us or easier, that is the richness of this process. Because again, coming back to the goal is to reduce climate change, and there is no one way of doing it. So the discussion between companies, the discussion between industries is what's going to take us there. We're not going to be able to make it alone. And this is a pre-competitive discussion. It's not a matter of my product is $10, yours is $9. It's away from all of this. So it's a discussion that can be done between competitors as well. So it's a very interesting way of bringing together the whole community, the whole enterprise community, and saying, okay, this is how I'm doing it. I was just thinking, when I talk to them, and I use the same example, it's I have 100 trucks, and that's my logistic. My internal logistic has 100 trucks. I would love to know how Mercedes-Benz, for example, tackles climate change in logistics. They should have, I don't know, 1,500, or how Amazon is going to do it. Because, I mean, they're bringing the whole drone and the whole EV situation, but we don't have electrical vehicles in Colombia. So how are they going to do it? And I mean, that's the richness, that's the nice discussion that we need to have, and we need to have it quick. So putting together the collective right now is more urgent than ever, because we need to know what people are doing so we can leapfrog. If no one's doing this, okay, I'm going to start doing it because it works. I'm not going to start, we need to work on that and make it part of this dynamic.
Thank you. So interesting, too, thinking about the collaboration and idea and knowledge sharing within the industry, but also looking to other industries for best practices and innovation and ideas. Nova, are there certain areas in supply chain in particular that you feel demand collaboration in order to find solutions? Like, what are those areas where it's like, we haven't quite figured that out?
Yeah, it's been being part of coalitions and the forming of coalitions and even smaller collaborations between brands and suppliers is the most promising area that I've ever experienced in my career, and it's the most rewarding. Like, it's the most empowering as an individual, partly because of the learning and the knowledge exchange that happens. But in terms of the value chain and upstream supply, there are certain economic and infrastructure problems that can only be solved through aggregating demand signals, for example, like aggregating, purchase orders or commitments to purchase over a long-term time horizon, like 5 to 10 years. That is really essential for supporting regenerative agriculture. I've seen many companies invest in their own small projects with 1 or 2 suppliers, but the gains that they make in terms of the overall climate impact of their company and their whole value chain are still relatively small. Whereas when you see a Pepsi and Practical Farmers of Iowa, and I won't name names because I don't want to divulge anything anonymous, but 5 other large CPG brands get together and collaborate to support a regenerative agriculture project. I'm going to mention ones that are here in the United States, but it's happening globally in Latin America and other places too. Well, they will support a project that might involve 1,000 smallholder farmers or 200 grain farmers here in the Midwest in the United States. That's when you see real progress being made. And when they do that, they create this economic signal, and sometimes they fund the development of like ingredient processing infrastructure, mills and things like that. In those regions, that creates an uplift for all of the other small brands and small suppliers that are in the region. So that's just one example of where I think collaboration is super powerful. It's an agricultural shift.
What a great example too, Nova. Thank you for that. As we look at the role of collaboration and then the potential, right? Like what could this mean for our industry, and that being a sustainable food industry? I was just thinking about if anyone saw Sean Acor's keynote this morning, which was incredible, and it will be available. I think it's on demand right now, so you can check it out. But he said, I think it was that happiness is the joy you feel when you're reaching your potential. And so I want us to think about what is the potential of the food industry. And I think we can experience happiness because we are on the path, but what would that look like? What would a truly sustainable food industry look like to each of you and each of you?
I think that one of the best approaches is trying to have more like local market, moving commodities from one side of the world to here, and then maybe go back for another process and move it to another country just to have a finished good here. That increased a lot the footprint of a product. Using the more local products, I think that's the best idea. But definitely, one of the examples Nova said about just the almonds in California, you can use maybe local almonds, but at the end you have a huge GHG or footprint for that specific product. So it's a continuous learning process of all the food industry. It's not easy at all. I think nobody's aware of the whole food industry and all the steps and all the supply chains and all the transport from one place to another. So I think that can be just a little approach, just to buy a little bit more local products.
Thank you, Daniel.
Okay, I guess I'll offer up my vision. When I got really inspired to work in food is when I realized the power of agriculture and what a shift in agricultural practices could mean. And there were some people in the room earlier today who were part of me discovering that and having this kind of epiphany and deciding that's what I wanted to focus on. So that's what gives me happiness. And when I think about what could happen there, it would be raising kind of the minimum bar across the food industry, but particularly because this natural products industry lifts that bar up by communicating and investing in a shift in the way that we produce the ingredients and embodying that shift in these products that we're bringing to market, so that we're creating this virtuous cycle, right? We're supporting farmers, we're supporting a shift to agriculture, we're building our own businesses, and we're empowering each of us as shoppers and eaters to be part of that virtuous cycle by consuming those products. And hopefully those products also are great for our health, right? That's what a lot of the brands in the show today are leading with. So yeah, I would like to see us lift just raise the bar for the whole industry. And then that superpower that I mentioned, this like the ability to sequester carbon in the soil, we will have other industries begin to invest in the food and agriculture industry just to be part of that, just to support carbon sequestration. So our industry can actually lead a bunch of other industries toward solving climate change. So that's my vision right now.
Thank you, Nova. So much of that resonates with me, and that being empowered, consumer empowerment, to be a part of that virtuous cycle. I think that that's something I'd like to reiterate, and then also emphasize that everyone should be empowered to be a part of that. So for me, it's that accessibility piece too, so that every person feels like they can make the decisions that are better for their health and the health of planet. So beautifully stated. Thank you, Nova. Felipe, thoughts on a better future?
Better future for food industry. Well, I think that, I mean, what brings joy in terms of what I've seen and my experience is I think it's when companies become honest of what they want and who they are, or what they are. I think we're in the moment in time that consumers are not expecting perfection, but consumers are expecting truth, honesty. And with that, you have companies that are examples on what they're doing in a lot of sectors, and there's companies that don't know how to get there, but do want to improve in their practices. So I think that what the nicer things that I've seen, or what brings me joy, and when I think of an industry that moved forward in terms of sustainability, carbon emission, is those companies that say, you know what, this is where I am. This is what I am right now, and this is where I want to be. I'm not there yet, no. But I'm going to be there, I'm going to be clear, and this is the way that I'm going to move forward. Because if the consumer, or if the same industry don't let those newcomers, those people that are putting their head up in the water do this, we're only going to have people that are under the water and people that are over the water breathing, but not in the middle. And I think, like Noah said, everyone should be able to move forward into there. So I think that honesty, truth, and a clear path in whatever way the company wants to move, but move in such a way that is informed and communicated, I think that's the best way, because it lets us all know where we stand with the companies and with the industry. If it's not aligned with me in climate change, but it's aligned with me, I don't know, in gender, then we know that this company works for gender. They're not into climate change yet, but maybe we can work together on that, and how to, I mean, it's there, but we have to be honest and transparent with our goals and who we are and what we're aiming for. I think that that's, for me, it brings joy when people come out and say it like that.
I love that. Thank you, Felipe. And I love these quick fire rounds because you all have such great things to say. So I'm going to do one more. Final question for all of you to answer is, what would your one call to action be for people in the room and anyone who will see this session online or be talking about it, the industry at large? One call to action.
Maybe you can start thinking my answer.
We're thinking in Spanish.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Entiendo. I guess I would say understand your ingredients. Do whatever you can do tomorrow to measure the impact of your ingredients. If you want to reach out to us, I'm happy to share some information with you. But the most powerful place that you can work right now, where you have the biggest footprint and the biggest opportunity to do good, is in your product and the ingredients that you put into that product. So understand the impact of those, and then from there you can make all kinds of great decisions.
Yes, actually it's in the same line, because we can see right now the clients, the consumer right now are the one reading more, educating themselves more about the products, the ingredient, and even you start thinking maybe this product, at least we start with one simple label. This is a fair trade cocoa bean, and this is not. Maybe I choose this one because it has good agricultural practices, is fair with the community, with the workers involved in the project. So maybe I start choosing these specific ingredients. What about the sugar? Maybe I can use this one that has a sustainable program in place. So maybe I can choose this specific ingredients. So, and you start building your products with knowledge about each one of the inputs that you're gonna use. So the raw materials, the source, the people involved, the companies, and I think that's the only way, and people is doing it right now. The idea that right now the retailers have a huge sustainability plan for the next couple of years, it tells me and tells everybody that the consumers are demanding this right now. So they are moving the whole supply chain to do it. So they are moving to that direction. And actually that's because of the consumer, people here are doing it right now.
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel. Felipe, take us home.
Still thinking. No. I'm thinking that if I was in a position to call action right now, I would say, okay, I'm not expecting all companies to have experts on climate or know this, but most of our suppliers do have someone more expert. Call out, call for help. Whoever you have more communication with, open up the communication and be open about it. I have no idea how should I do this. Can we set up a plan? Can I set up a strategy? And that would be my first. Call someone who knows about this, or your biggest client or your biggest supplier, and work from there and see where that takes you with a plan. That would be my first call to action.
Thank you, Felipe. And I think I know 3 people who are available to everyone to answer questions. Thank you all. We're about at time. Such a great discussion. Thank you, all 3 of you. Thank you, Dabone, for partnering with us on this. And thank you all. I know this was time out of your day, and I hope time well spent, certainly for me, and so much rich information. So there are a few minutes. We have this room, so please grab some materials from the back, have a conversation with our panelists, and have a great rest of Natural Products Expo East. I hope we'll see you at the concert tonight and all the stuff tomorrow as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.